Right. So we have the capability now of programmatically deciding to go or not to go to a different page if a certain condition is true. But what I'd like to be able to do also is pass around some information to other pages so that those components can perhaps render dynamically different content depending on the parameters that we pass. Right. So to do that, we're going to have to configure our routes, right, so that they can receive parameters, right. So here in the where we declare our routes, right, we declare login and register and profile. We can make it so that these can receive parameters, right. We can declare them that their patterns, their URL patterns, can have placeholders, right, where those placeholders can then receive, can have a specific value in the path variable that we pass along. Right. So let's go back and in the declaration of our routes here, right, and we can declare this profile not to be just profile. You can also add here a placeholder, and you say this could be the user ID. Okay, so that we only navigate, if we see a user ID, and then we can use that user ID to then retrieve the particular user based on that ID. Okay. Now notice that we broke our navigation, right? Notice that if we go to login, even if I have Alice, and I click on login, notice that it tried to navigate to a path that doesn't exist. It tried to navigate to /profile, but there is no /profile anymore. There's /profile /something, right? So for instance, if I go back and into my login component, right, and here I add a 1, 2, 3, for instance, right, and I go back to login, and I say Bob login, it does navigate to the profile. And notice that it adds the 1, 2, 3 at the URL. See that? So ideally, we would be able to parse this ID from the URL and then display the information about that particular user, right, off of that profile. So let's see how we can do that. First, let's make sure that our data, we have everything we need in the service. Right, notice that that these have they have the IDs. Right, Alice has 1, 2, 3, and Bob has 2, 3, 4. Right, so we would like to be able to grab that user ID and use that as part of the URL. So we can do that, right? Let's go back to the login. Use the login, and we can build this. We can say, actually, instead of using this hard-coded URL like this, we can build it, piece by piece. Right, where the first part is profile. The second part would be whatever the user that came back, since it's not null, it should have an ID attached to it. So it's user._ID. Yes? Right. So let's build that again. Let's go back to login. So if I say Bob, right, notice that it's 2, 3, 4. But if I do Alice, notice that it's 1, 2, 3. See that? So that we're passing along to the profile. Excellent. So what's left to do here is that the profile should be rendering content that is specific to that URL. Right? If it's 1, 2, 3, it should say hi Alice. If it's 2, 3, 4, it should say hi Bob. Right? So let's do that. All right. So what we can do here is that in the profile component, just like this router that allows you to manipulate the URL, right? There are other components. There are other libraries that allow you to parse that URL, right? And do something about it. Okay. So the library activated route library allows you to parse that URL, retrieve all those parameters, right? And then do something about it, right? So to do that, we're going to load. We're going to inject in our profile component an activated route of type activated route. So let's do that. Right. So in our profile component, where is it? We're going to ask for an activated route. I'm going to say private activated route of type activated route. I'm going to inject that. Now we can use that, right? We can use that to look at what's coming in through that parameter, right? Notice that already our component implements the onInit interface, right? The onInit interface declares a single method called the ng onInit. This is the equivalent on component did mount in React, right? Although in React we do it by extending the React.component, right? And we can then implement all the various lifecycle methods that we want. Here, it's a little more specific. Right? You have to implement the interface before you can declare the function. Yes, implement the function. So in here is where we can start using our activated route and say, hey, what's in the route? You know, what are the parameters that came in right in the path? I want to take a look at them. Right? So we can say, you know, this dot activated route. And we can look at the parameters in the activated route. So we can say that dot params. Right, the parameters is anything in the path variables. Right, it's a map. It's a map, and we can register a listener and say, I want to be notified every time the path changes. Right, if the path changes from 123 to 234, I want to be notified. Right, because I need to re-update. You know, instead of saying hi Alice, I need to say hi Bob. Yes? Right? So you can declare a listener and say I'm going to subscribe to the parameters if they change. Okay? So you're gonna pass me the params, and the params is going to be a it's going to be a map, right? Which is that map is based on the routes. It's going to contain the map is going to contain all the path variables that were declared in the path. So one of the things in there in that parameters in that map is going to be a variable called user ID with the actual value of either 123 or 234 or whatever, right? It's going to have that information. And then we can do whatever we want with it. It's up to us to do whatever we want, okay? What we're going to do is that we want to render a specific user, right? So for now we're just going to render the user ID, right? Something really trivial, just verifying that we're getting that user ID, okay? So let's do that. Let's in the profile component, let's declare a local variable, user ID. And in the params, we're just going to update it. We're going to say, hey, this.user ID, I'm going to set it to the params. So params, it's a map whose values are the various path variables that we declare in the route, which is user ID. Okay? So this is going to, am I missing subscribe? Nope. Maybe dot params, oops, dot subscribe, and there we go. All right, so that means that in the profile now I have access to this variable here, and so in the HTML I can now render the user ID. Okay, notice that it's 123, right? And I can even type it and change it here, 234. 345. It's just reading whatever it's on that path, right? And it's retrieving it. So if I try to go to login and I go with Bob, right? It's 234. If I go back and it's Alice, then it's 123. See that? Very good. What I'd like to be able to do instead of just showing the ID is I would like to show the entire object of the user. Maybe say, get the username of Alice and say, hi Alice. All right, so let's do that. Also, before we do that, the subscription, right, stays on forever. The component is going to be notified of any changes in the path, right? So that if it matches, right, it will be notified. Oftentimes you want to, you want to stop being notified, right? So that you can unsubscribe. You can unsubscribe from the changes in the path, right? So that just like there's an unginit, there's an undestroy, where you can be notified of so that we can unsubscribe. So we're not going to do that though. Right. So what I'd like to be able to do is that now that I have the ID, I'd like to be able to retrieve that user with that particular ID. Right. So let's do that. Let's create that.